morning, everyone. My name's Rachel Greatrix. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Ucat. And this morning, I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the key bits about the test, some key information about registering, sitting and preparing. But I'm hoping that my talk will only last about 15-20 minutes. I want to make a lot of time for questions and answers. So please send those through. Dee is going to keep an eye on the chat, and hopefully we can answer quite a few of your questions as we make it through. Here's a list of the 30 UK university medical and dental schools that currently use our tests. This list is obviously on our website alongside the different course codes that they require for the Ucat at the moment. These are the key dates for this year, which some of you will understand have shifted a little due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We opened registration on the 1st of July and testing begins on the 3rd of August, running through to our last testing date on the 1st of October. We are advising candidates to book and, if possible, test early. And this is really because we don't know what the impact of the pandemic might be later in the cycle. And there is a danger that we may need to have to reschedule, cancel bookings and move people around. And we really prefer to avoid that. So we're advising candidates to book and test early if possible. We, at last count, I think we had about 22,000 people have already booked their test, a lot of bookings into August. So that's reassuring me that people are getting that message, but I hope that is possible for those of you that haven't booked or registered. That would be my advice, to get on there, get on our website, follow the instructions about registration and booking, and make your test bookings when you can. The test fees are there, and I'll talk a bit later about bursaries for candidates that need assistance with test fees. We normally deliver our test at Pearson VUE test centres, which are located throughout the UK and internationally. Due to the impact of the pandemic, we have a dual offering in 2020. You can choose to take your test at a Pearson VUE test centre, or you can take the Ucat online in your own home. I'm going to talk a bit about how you make that choice in a second, but I would comment that we at the moment have plenty of availability at Pearson VUE test centres. So don't feel that you're pressurised to take the test online at home. You do have a genuine choice about where you want to test. And we would really advise you to think about where you will perform best in the Ucat. Some candidates, and I know a lot of you will have been being educated and indeed assessed at home, you might prefer a more relaxed testing environment and choose to test at home. But there are candidates who prefer a bit more structure, a bit more formality, and may think they perform better in the test centre. You need to think about that before you book your test. We can approve various access arrangements, and there's a lot of information on our website about access arrangements you might require. But some of these access arrangements are not available in the online test at home. So again, that might restrict your ability to take the Ucat online. And finally, there are slightly different ID requirements if you're testing at home or testing in a test centre. However, the test content is the same no matter where you sit the test. We've issued candidate guides on our website for whichever route you want to go down, and that gives you all the information you need about registering, booking, ID, links to access arrangements, and more importantly, what the day will feel like, what the experience will feel like on the day of testing. So if you test at a test centre, you're in a formal test room, there are health and safety measures in place, and at the moment we've got 2 metres distancing in test centres in the UK. That is subject to change as regulations and government advice change. In a test centre, you do not need to be accompanied by a parent or guardian. You have a set of whiteboards to assist you taking the test, to assist with calculations or certain items in decision making. And you're invigilated by a member of test centre staff. If you have any problems, you can raise them with them. And as I've mentioned, we feel that the test centre is probably more suited to those with complex access arrangements and those needing to take the longer versions of the test in the test room. Taking the test at home, you need to have a quiet and private location to test, free from disturbance. You can't leave your computer during the 2-hour test. You are only allowed certain items and water at your desk. We've got a lot of information on our website about the requirements for your PC and laptop, about internet connections, and there is a system test you can run to see whether you would meet those very requirements. So there are links from our website to that. One of the differences about testing online at home is that if you're under 18, and a lot of our UK candidates will be, their parent or guardian needs to be present at the beginning of the test to confirm your identity, and they need to have ID with them. Again, there's information around this in the Ucat online. In order to assist with note-taking during the test, you may take in an erasable whiteboard to the test, and again there are a description of what is acceptable within the test centre in terms of in your test room in terms of that whiteboard. I mentioned earlier the test fees. We offer bursaries for candidates that cover the full test fee. These are available to candidates in low-income households, and we accept a wide range of evidence to support a bursary application. The link that is there for the bursary scheme, and it's there on our website. We've issued well over 3,000 bursaries to candidates already. If you think you might be eligible, please look on our website. Even if you've booked and paid for your test, you can get your bursary retrospectively and get a refund. And again, I've mentioned access arrangements. Have a look on our website if you're usually entitled to different accommodations in public examinations, and we will try and meet those as best we can in your testing experience with the Ucat. So please get in touch via the link from that access arrangements page if needed. A brief overview of the test format, because there's a lot of information on our website about what is in the test and what these different sections look like, and I don't want to spend a huge amount of time going through that today. But there are 5 subtests within the Ucat which are listed there. These have different numbers of items in them, and the sections are of different timings. So this is the timings for the standard test. Between those sections, there are a 1-minute instruction section for a short break before you move on, and the total test time is 2 hours. The subtests are separately timed and will time you out when you reach the end of that specific timing and you move on to the next section. Again, if you have a look on our website, there's more information about this, and in the practice materials, and you can see some full timed tests in order to assist with your preparation. So how should you prepare, which I think is the most common question we're asked. You're not going to be used to quite a lot of items that you're going to see in the test. You need to familiarise yourself with the test content and allow some time to prepare thoroughly. And we would advise that you start 4 to 6 weeks prior to your test date, but really that varies so much from candidate to candidate that I wouldn't like to be too prescriptive. Our high scoring candidates suggest that preparing in short amount of times, but quite often over that period is helpful. And high scoring candidates tell us that they spend about 25 to 30 hours preparing for the test. We have a huge number of free resources available on the Ucat website, and I'll show you some of those shortly, but we believe there is enough there in terms of preparation resources and indeed the hints and tips that we offer from former candidates and from our own experience to help you get through the test and perform as well as you can. We always say to candidates to be cautious and sceptical about any claims that commercial or third-party materials third parties might make to assist you with testing. The items they're showing may not be the same standard you will encounter in the test, and some of those preparation materials are actually quite expensive. We would advise you to avoid them. So in terms of a preparation plan, we've said there we've got thousands of free practice questions available from our website. There's a tour tutorial on there which will help you navigate, show you how you navigate through the test, just some of the basics of moving between screens and moving about the screen. We also have on there a question tutorial which shows you what the different items look like in the test in each of our subtests and offers some hints and tips about how you might approach them. And that's really useful. You can choose the subtest where you think perhaps you're struggling most with and work through that to have a look at what advice we would give. We then have quite a number of items in separate question banks. So for example, if you think you need to focus on quantitative reasoning, you can go to those specific question banks and work through chunks of items to assist with your preparation for a specific subtest. And then we have an app, which I'm sure many of you have accessed, have downloaded, which has some items in there that you can do to assist and familiarise yourself with specific item types. We would advise you to save the practice test till later in your preparation. These are timed and can help you make a plan for working through the test. The timing in the test is critical, so you need to have a plan for working through each of those subtests, and that is where these timed practice tests that we offer on the website will come into play. So in terms of kind of very broad tips and advice that we would offer, I've mentioned timing is critical. You need a strategy for moving through each of the subtests. Be familiar with the functionality. You get an on-screen calculator to use in the test. There is a scratch pad for making notes if you want to use that in addition to your notepads or whiteboards. We would suggest that you brush up on some of your basic math skills for using quantitative reasoning and decision making. This isn't really challenging stuff, but if you haven't done A-level maths, you might want to revisit things like percentages and averages, just some of the kind of basic numerical calculations. And as you work through quantitative reasoning, you'll see some of the stuff that you need to be familiar with. You might want to practice your speed reading skills for verbal reasoning, but again, that's very much a personal choice, but that is an approach that some candidates take. You're unlikely to be familiar with a lot of the items you see in abstract reasoning and indeed in decision making, but you'll soon get used to these, and with abstract reasoning in particular, we do give some advice about how you might want to approach some of those items. And with regard to our test of situational judgment of the final subtest, this is a very different subtest. It's looking at how you make decisions about kind of ethical challenges, for example, in real life. And we advise that there are a number of resources you can look at, but the GMC guidelines on good medical practice is a good starting point to give you an overview of the kind of things that we're looking at within the situational judgment test. There is no negative marking in the test. We advise you to answer all the questions and don't leave any blanks. As I say, no points are deducted for wrong answers. If you get to a question you're struggling with, there is a feature within the test that you can flag that test to review later, that item to review later on, and that's what we really advise. So I would suggest answer the item, give it your best guess, and then flag it for review. And if you've got the time at the end of the subtest, you can go back to it and spend a bit more time on it. There's no point in spending time on an item you're struggling with and then maybe not getting to some of the items that you're perhaps a bit more familiar with. And as we've said there, save some of those, the fully timed practice tests, for the end of your preparation, so that you can see where you need to spend your time, maybe on timing or what particular items you're struggling with. In terms of results, our Ucat is scored with the individual subtests are scored between a score of 300 and 900. So the overall score is between 1200 and 3600. You get a separate banding for the situation judgment test, bands 1 to 4, with band 1 being the highest performing candidates. The mean average score in 2019 was 2,483. There's a lot of information on our website around performance in previous years by our candidates, which might be of interest to you, particularly once you've got your results. If you test at a test centre, you get your results immediately as you leave the test centre on a printout, and testing elsewhere. They will be available in your Pearson VUE account. We're advised within 24 hours, but I would expect that that would be rather sooner than that. We feel very strongly that you should have your Ucat result before you submit your UCAS application. You need to know how your chosen universities use the Ucat and whether your score is good enough to apply to those universities, whether it will be considered. So that is a critical thing, but do check those university websites around how they use the Ucat in their selection processes, because I'm sure, as you're familiar, that they do use it differently. In terms of delivering results to universities, after the UCAS deadline, we liaise with UCAS in order to obtain your university choices, and we pass results to these universities early in November. You don't need to do anything in order for that result to get to your universities. So that's broadly it from me. And we can move on to a Q&A. Please make a note of our website, follow Ucat on social media so that we can give you updates, and there's some free practice questions on there. But critically this year, and we are very keen to be able to be in touch with our candidates as much as we can, given the fact the challenges that might be posed around COVID-19. So please do follow us on social media so that we can stay in touch with you during the cycle. Happy to start taking some questions.
Perfect. So I've been jotting down a few questions, and one question that came up quite often was if we taking the UKCAT online. They want to know what would happen if there was a disconnect either on the end of the candidate or on the end of the server itself, and how that would be accommodated for.
Okay, so if there is a technical issue during your test, the Ucat Online is invigilated at a distance by an individual, so they will know you're having a problem, and there are various ways that they can contact you. There is a chat function within the test itself, and that is probably the way they would try and contact you first. If the disconnect is such that you have lost connection locally, which is probably what the issue is more likely to be, they have your phone number as well, and they can phone you. There is some advice on our website about you needing to have a phone to hand during the test. So they will phone you and discuss options. One of the things about the online is that if you do have a technical issue, although I appreciate that an interruption to your test isn't good, you will not have lost any time or lost any answers. The way the test is delivered means that once we get you restarted, you will restart at exactly the point that you left the test. I know it's not brilliant if you've had an interruption, but you needn't worry that you might have lost time, or more importantly, lost some of the answers that you've submitted.
The next question was, is there any difference in the way that the UKCAT scores are going to be assessed this year, given the current situation? I think if you're
wanting information about how your universities will use the UCAT, you need to go to their websites and see. I wouldn't anticipate at the moment that the way they use the UCAT would be significantly different, but I'm speaking at a point when we haven't even started testing. So, you know, if there are issues during testing or issues in terms of, you know, UCAS applications because of the impact of COVID, maybe things will change. But at the moment, I think all our universities would, they will have published on their website how they're selecting for 2021 entry, and they will be sticking by that at the moment. So please go and look at their website so you can get a sense of how they're using the test.
Rachel. The next question was, how will the UKCAT be weighted against school grades, predicted grades, and GCSEs when applying to university?
Okay, so again, our universities all use the test in a different way in selection. So some people do weight it against other factors, as you've just described, so against GCSE scores or predicted grades, or other maybe local measures that they take into account. Other universities maybe check that you've achieved their minimum academic requirements, and then perhaps use the UCAT to rank candidates after that. So again, in terms of needing to know the detail of different universities' selection processes, you need to go and look at their websites, and you'll get a sense then of what of how they use it. And also, a lot of our universities publish the kind of scores that candidates have had in the past, and you know, in order to be selected for interview, for example. So there's quite a lot of information around on their websites around that.
Next question was, how does the candidate find out if they qualify for extra time, and how will they need to apply for it?
Okay, so you should know as an individual whether you qualify for extra time. Our main guidance would be whether you currently get extra time in public examinations at school, college or university. If you go to our website, there is a section on access arrangements that gives you some guidance about how to apply and the kind of evidence that we're looking for. It's an online application that you make. You upload evidence to support the application. But generally, if you've got extra time in school, for example, a letter from your school confirming that is the simplest and most efficient way of applying. But we will look at other evidence if people are struggling to get hold of information.
So another question was, a candidate was worried that or was concerned that our online tests and test centres mark equally, or will online tests be marked more harshly due to the risk of cheating?
They're all marked exactly the same. There is no differences between the content or the marking between where you sit the test.
Was that if we are doing the UKCAT online, can separate number pads be used if the laptop that we're using to take the test doesn't have one?
I think we have an FAQ on that, but yes, if you've got one that either you can sometimes plug them into your laptop, or people have wireless ones, but yes, I believe that is acceptable. But you might want to just check on our website. I think there is an FAQ that talks about using, you know, a wireless mouse, for example, and those additional things to assist with testing.
Sorry about that. And another question is, in terms of surroundings, will they be checked? I'm assuming this is for an online examination. Will the surroundings be checked before the candidate begins to take the?
Yeah, so as part of the check-in process for the online exam, you have to present a photo of yourself and present your ID, and then you have to show some photographs of your surroundings prior to starting the exam. If then during the exam the proctor sees anything strange or unexpected, they're likely to pause the exam and ask you to clarify what's happening or what they've observed. So if you've shown some photos of your environment and they're not looking quite right, the proctor would pick those up.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think that's all the common questions that we had. And was there anything else you had to add for yourself at all?
I don't think so. There do seem to be quite a lot of questions still coming through. I don't know if you're...
I think they're just taking a minute to update for me. There's a question that says, do those with extra time get placed away from those who don't, so that people get to finish early or to finish at different times get distracted by the others?
So no, not necessarily. One of the things we do advise candidates is that the environment in the test centre isn't quite the same as maybe some of the environments you've had for assessments elsewhere. There will be candidates for other tests, potentially for the Ucat, who may be coming and going at different times, but that happens quite quietly. It shouldn't interrupt your testing. But it is the experience that everyone will have during testing. You do have access to earplugs and headphones if you think you'd find that kind of thing disruptive. So that can help.
Another question. Sorry, keep going.
No, come on.
Another question was there is a candidate who said, if we are a current international student studying in the UK but sitting the tests in our home country, what address do we provide for registration?
I think registration asks for your home address, so I would provide that.
Okay. I think the questions are just being updated on my end, but if anything else catches your eye, please feel free to.
There are loads there coming through. Right, I might just try and whiz up from the bottom and see what I can get through very quickly. So do we have to apply for headphones? No, they are provided in the test centre. We're just seeking clarity about what the situation is if you're testing at home, because you might be able to use earplugs there, but we're trying to get some clarity on that at the moment. You can erase the whiteboard throughout your online test. Yeah, because you've only got to write a double-sided whiteboard for that. You will need to do that. So we advise that you've got an eraser on hand to do that. Candidate asking if you can apply for extra time if you've booked your test date already. Yes, you can, but then you will need to cancel your test in order to book the test with extra time, because it's a different time slot and different requirements around that. So yeah, there are a couple of questions about that. A question about background noise if you're working at home. I think that if it was a one-off issue, the example here is a dog barking or car noise, then I think that would be fine. I think if it was a noise that was a more longer-term interruption to the test, or anything that seemed to be kind of too much out of the ordinary. Somebody asking about paper instead of the board. No, you're not allowed to use paper. If you're testing at home, the whiteboard is the only option for taking notes throughout the test. There's a candidate here talking about the kind of difficulties in testing at home because of background noise and family members. I mean, my advice would be that if you're not confident that you've got a quiet testing location, then you ought to test in a test centre. That would be my best advice to candidates in that kind of situation. Because you might be interrupted by the invigilator if they've got concerns about background noise, but also you are not going to perform at the best if you're listening, if you can hear the rest of your household. Ideally, you want to tell the rest of your household to go out whilst you're testing, I would suggest, but I know that that's not always practical.
There's a candidate wanting to know, are there any practice papers for the extra time format of UKCAT test so we can practice the correct timings per section?
Yes, so we our practice tests are offered in 3 different versions. So the standard timing, the timing with 25% extra, and also an untimed version. So for most people, that will cover them. We do offer some versions of the test with more time and with rest breaks, and we don't, our practice materials don't have that, but you can use the untimed test, for example, to assist with that maybe.
There are also candidates asking about safety precautions in the test centre, such as wearing masks, or if there's a good way for them to know what their local test centre expects of them.
So at the moment, we're kind of a bit, at the moment, internationally, apart from in some areas of the UK and Australia, mask wearing is compulsory in our test centres. Our advice up to the end of last week was that wearing masks in England, in fact, in the UK, was advised. I think it is likely to become compulsory in test centres from next week in England, but there are different rules applying in Wales and Northern Ireland. But I would suggest, I mean, our best advice would be that you probably ought to wear a mask in a test centre, just for your own safety and the reassurance of other people that might be testing. At the moment in test centres in the UK, there is 2 metre distancing between test takers, which should be reassuring, but it is potentially that might change as we work through the testing period later in the summer.
There is a question asking, how long do you suggest to study before the UCAT exam?
So I think I said that in the presentation. We would probably say around kind of 4 to 6 weeks ought to be sufficient. But really, it is, you know, it is very much a kind of individual choice about how much you want to do, whether you want to do short amounts over a longer period of time, or whether, you know, you kind of feel that the items, perhaps you're familiar enough with some of those items that you could prepare in a shorter amount of time. I think the best advice would be to go onto our website, have a look at a few of the items from each of the subtests, and you'll start to get an idea about which areas you need to practice most with, and then you can start to put your own specific preparation plan together.
There is a question asking if candidates are allowed to use laminate paper instead of a whiteboard if they don't have one at hand.
Yes, you are, and that is, I believe, included either in our guide or on one of the FAQs. So yes, you can use a laminated blank A4 piece of paper instead of a whiteboard.
There is a candidate asking if they are taking the test at home, would it be all right to connect extra items onto their device, such as a mouse or a number pad?
Yeah, I believe that is acceptable. So at the beginning of the test, as I say, you need to take a picture of the environment, and one of those is of your kind of testing location. So you would show that at that point. But yes, that should be acceptable.
Another candidate has asked if there is an issue with the keyboard or needing another whiteboard in the test centre, do we get that lost time back in the test centre?
Our advice, so if you have an issue, any kind of issue while you're testing in a test centre, you're advised to raise your hand to attract the attention of the invigilator. I would advise that unless it's a major issue, you should carry on responding to items, and whilst you wait for the invigilator to come, but they normally come pretty rapidly. you wouldn't get extra time. Well, there is no way we can allocate additional time to candidates in the middle of testing. If there has been a significant interruption for testing for any reason, we have systems to kind of deal with that situation. So it would be recorded as an incident at the test centre, and we would advise candidates to contact us after they have tested, and we can have a discussion with them about options at that stage, but we can't add in additional time during testing.
One candidate wants to know, will online practice papers be available?
Be available? Yes, so we have 4 fully timed practice tests on our website alongside the kind of item banks of questions for each of the different sections. So please go onto our website, look under the kind of preparation bits there, and you'll see all the different versions of the tests that are available.
Another question is, how do the universities get our test results?
So we finished testing towards the beginning of October. After the UCAS deadline, we send, we liaise with UCAS in order that we can obtain your UCAS choices. So the UCAS choices for all of our candidates. And once we've got those, we're in a position to deliver sets of results directly to universities. So we find out where you apply to, and then we deliver the results to those universities. So you don't need to get involved at that point, and that happens towards the beginning of November.
There's a question that's frequently asked, and it's what are some tips or best ways to improve on timing in the examination?
Timing, it's a bit difficult to advise, really, because I think it's a very personal thing, and also very different for each of the subtests. So I think my first bit of advice is to familiarise yourself with the items in the different subtests, and then start to plan how you time your way through. So, for example, in verbal reasoning, you have to read a chunk of text, and then there are 4 items relating to that chunk of text. So it's sort of going to take you longer to answer that first item than it's likely to the time needed to answer the item, the next 3 items, because you don't need to read the text in quite the detail again. So things like that mean that different subtests working through them are slightly different. And again, in, say, decision making, there are lots of different types of questions in there, and some of them will take more time than others. So I think you need to get a sense of what's in those tests and kind of plan a way to work through. I mean, of course, a kind of broad idea is dividing the time by the number of items, and then at least you kind of know maybe when you're halfway through whether you're on track or not, and whether you need to kind of speed up a bit. But it isn't quite as simple as that, because I think some of the items will take you longer than others for a variety of reasons. But I think once you're familiar with the items and have had a go of some of the timed elements, you'll get a sense of what you need to do.
There are a few questions about whiteboards again. Firstly, how many whiteboards do we get in a test, and can we rub them out? And there's also that if my whiteboard has plain on one side and a grid on the other, will that be allowed if I'm only using the blank side of the whiteboard?
So in the test centre, you do get a set of whiteboards, but I can't quite remember how many you get. But I think there are usually enough there for our candidates to work through. You can't rub out on the whiteboards in the test centre. If you think you're nearing the end of your set of whiteboards, you need to raise your hand, and the invigilator will bring you them. And probably doing that just slightly in advance of running out of space might help you with moving through the test. In terms of the whiteboard you might be using at home, the requirements are very specific around that. We've got very tight rules around testing at home. So no, you wouldn't be allowed to use a whiteboard that had any markings on either side. It's got to be blank.
The next question is it acceptable if the laptop we use has touch screen functionality?
You won't be able to use touchscreen functionality during the test. I believe it's locked down to avoid that happening.
The next question is, would we be able to take in our own whiteboards?
So in the test centre, you use the note boards which are provided by the test centre. You can't take in your own. At home, you use your own whiteboard.
There's a question on how do you send pictures of your environment to the proctor?
So if you have a look at our online testing guide, it will explain that. And I've been through the process myself. I think in the guide it looks a bit more complicated than it actually is. But you're basically using your phone and uploading those images, and it is pretty straightforward. So you upload an image of yourself and then of your environment.
Excellent. I'm just trying to refresh and see if there's any more new questions coming in. Which I'm not able to. Oh, if headphones are allowed to be worn while taking the test at home, how and when will we find out?
We'll update. We'll update our website when we can. There are some FAQs about testing at home, and we probably put the information in there. If it is a major change, we might well try and communicate via social media. So I'll see where we get to with that, but we'll try and get the information out to as many candidates as we can.
There's questions on, do we need to provide our UCAS number in case there are people with the same names as us?
No, you don't. We match using a variety of pieces of information with UCAS, and we in the office do a check of that data. So if we came across candidates that have been matched that we're thinking incorrectly, so we do sometimes have challenges around twins and people with, I mean, you'd have to have the same name and date of birth for it to be an issue, but we do sometimes have issues about matching of people with very similar demographic details, but we would pick that up before the results are sent to universities, and we would check which is the correct candidate. So we would pick that up.
I'm just conscious that we're nearing the end of the session, so if we could take a last few questions. One of the questions was, when will interim scores be published?
I can't remember the date, and I don't know whether it's on our website, but there is a section of our website that deals with test statistics, and we certainly would be something we would be communicating over social media. We normally aim for that to be the middle of September, and I think that is where we'd be aiming for this year as well.
And finally, there's a candidate wanting to know, what are the rules on calculators?
So the only calculator you can use within the test is the one that's embedded within the test software itself. So when you are in quantitative reasoning, for example, there is a calculator you can click on in the top left-hand corner, and that's what you use. It's a very basic calculator. It's not the kind of scientific calculator that lots of our candidates will be used to using. So one of the pieces of advice we do advise is that when you're practicing in the test, practice using that calculator, because you need to be used to that functionality, which is a lot more basic than you'll be used to using in calculations.